Okay, hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today at our RG podcast. This is Isaiah Diesel calling out of Korea, and I got a guest calling down from down under. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Good, mate. How about yourself?
All right, I normally introduce my guests as special, but this is definitely a special event because I'm not going to call myself a historian, but from someone with a degree in history, I will have to say that you are a bit of a superhero of mine because normally when we get into historical talks, I normally run roughshod over anybody I talk to. And the one time you and I had a discussion, we got into history and you like, wow, I was not expecting that. So yeah, you have mad respects coming from this end. But yeah, is the weather cleared up over there in Australia?
No, it was raining today. It was not as bad as it has been, though. I think we've had cyclones, we've had hails. It's all been happening here. Flooding,
Right.
You name it. We have had. It's been it's been a little bit crazy, but yeah, nothing out of the ordinary for what we get. You know, it's probably, if anything, my thoughts are with the people in Japan at the moment. I think they're probably doing it pretty rough.
Right. It was a flooding. Of course, you had that horrible tsunami that hit about 10 years ago. That was quite devastating.
Japan?
Yeah, Japan.
Yeah, there was a massive earthquake 2 days ago.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I kind of been. What's
massive? Actually, I was. They said it might even impact parts of Korea, but it obviously didn't. But big earthquake a couple of days ago. But anyway, that's not here to talk about that.
Right. So very interesting. Actually, you and I unfortunately didn't get to meet. We had plans to meet, but I do hope that you and your family had a good Christmas time. So can you tell me very quickly about I don't know. I wanted to wish you Merry Christmas before, but do atheists celebrate Christmas?
Hell yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, of course we do.
Or you have Boxing Day down under.
Yeah, we've got Boxing Day, Christmas Eve. We do it all. No, look, Christmas is a cultural holiday as much as anything. You know, it's part, I think, something that Western and to an extent even Eastern, certain aspects of Eastern culture have embraced. It's there is a religious significance there for some people, but I mean, for those of us who are non-believers, look, it's just a great day with family. It's a fun cultural day. Right.
And you know what? I'm American, so I'm not sure if you know this, how much you know about American culture, but basically Christmas starts the day after like Thanksgiving. Like literally, that's when people get into Christmas mode, and so they start decorating and they start doing their shopping at the end of November. And so going from that to coming here to South Korea, like it's not a big deal at all here. In fact, about five years ago with my wife, I went to their, we celebrated Christmas together, and I brought their family like a bunch of gifts, and nobody had any gifts at all. And so they all felt like really awkward. It's a pretty funny little experience, but yeah, it's a pretty big part of the year. But I sometimes think about this, like Chris, like it seems like for a month out of the year, like people get into a totally different mindset. And I think sometimes like how great that would be if we could keep that spirit of generosity and goodwill and giving like up for the whole year, but the chances of that seem pretty slim. What do you think about that?
Look, as nice as it might be, I think what makes Christmas special is it's unique. I think it's like if I gave you a present every day, it would take away the impact of when I did give you a present. It just becomes something that happens. And I think the nice thing about Christmas is it's once a year. It's a big day. It's an important day. It's a day where people will put issues aside to wish each other the best.
Right. That's an interesting take. I never thought about it from that perspective, but wow, thank you for that. So, okay, without further ado, So just so that we're on an equal footing here, can you kind of, just to kind of set the stage of this conversation, can you kind of explain where you are politically? Because maybe you can explain the little flub that we had earlier today with the Republican thing that you had me change, and then kind of explain where, I don't know,
Yeah.
where Australia lies politically and where kind of where you're on in that perspective.
Yeah. So look, I am a conservative.
Mhm.
Conservative can mean slightly different in different countries, but I think in most parts of the world, I'd be considered a conservative, apart from probably some of the fundamentalist countries. They probably consider me very moderate. But in Australia, so Republican, if you're a Republican in Australia, that means that you're in favour of a republic, which tends to be more of a left-wing idea. So if it's not uncommon for, I guess, people on the right or conservatives to be pro-republic, but myself, I'm a staunch monarchist. You know, I'm pro the king. Don't want a president. I'm happy with things the way they are. So the other thing that is a little bit different in Australia is our right-wing party is called the Liberal Party. So it's always interesting when I communicate with Americans, because for Americans, Republican means right and Liberal means left, and in Australia, Liberal means right, and a Republican is probably on the left.
Okay, so let's just line item a few things real quick, and then we'll just so I can kind of gauge where you're at, because that is a bit confusing for me. But I think if I ask you, like, I think for the most part, if I ask somebody their opinions on one single issue, I can get some kind of idea of where they're coming from. Like, so are you pro gun, or like people should be able to have guns or not?
No, I'm not pro gun. Well, sorry. If I was in America, I understand why America is pro gun. And with the amount of guns you've got there, I would probably be pro gun. I don't have any issue with people having small arms or things for self protection. But look, in Australia, gun ownership is virtually non-existent.
Right, because I heard that there was like a pretty big mass shooting there that, like, I don't know, but it was like some kind of like golf resort or something, like 30 people that got shot or something. And then they put in some pretty strict gun laws after that.
Yeah, so it wasn't a golf resort. It was Port Arthur. So Port Arthur's it's a historical site in town down the bottom of Tasmania that tends to get a lot of tourists, a lot of family sort of tourists. And back in 1995 or 96, I think it was, there was a mass shooting. It was around about 30 people were killed, and it was something that was
I got that right,
extremely, yeah, it was extremely unusual for Australia. I remember it, when it happened. As I was young at the time, but it's certainly
really
something I remember. Yeah, it was so unusual. I know that in the US there seems to be a shooting every week, but
yeah, exactly.
Weird. Yeah, it was. We'd never had anything like it, and as a result, the government, so the Liberal government, the right wing government in Australia, outlawed semi-automatic weapons, and people handed their weapons back in without sort of thinking about it.
By the way, it says Chris is pro serial killer. I do want to say something that Australia has had, this is not laughable, but Australia has had an inordinate amount of like serial killers there, man. Like what's going on down under, man? There's been a lot of serial killers out there. Like people normally think of Australia being like really peaceful and like fun loving, maybe because of the koalas and the kangaroos, but like there's actually been quite a bit of serial killers from down there, right? Isn't that right?
We've had a couple. I don't think we've had any more than probably anywhere else in the world. I think we had a few famous ones, but yeah, look, who knows?
And they made that movie in America. I think maybe that's what. Actually, they made a couple of movies about. Maybe okay, so maybe that's what it is. Is that America has made a few movies about the some famous cases, infamous cases out
Now,
of there. So
okay. So what you've got to understand is in Australia, everything is trying to kill you. Everything.
I heard that.
So
Even the
we
drop bears. Even the drop bears.
The drop bears are dangerous. It's people. The amount of American tourists, in particular, who have been hurt by drop bears.
Mauled. Very high. Right.
Yeah. Look, it's a scratching and biting. It's
So
it's horrendous. There needs to be more awareness of what drop bears can actually do.
Right.
And,
so the thing
human
is,
rights, human rights for atheists. So I reckon I know who that is. There in the chat, and I mean, you can for the veracity. No, it's not. No, it's someone I know that I think could vouch for the veracity of drop bears, because if it's who I think it is, in their region in particular, the drop bears are nasty.
So okay, so the reason why I'm framing this to you is because there's a pretty damn sharp divide in America concerning guns, because the liberals, Democrats, who we tend to think about, you call them Republicans, but I don't know, that's weird to me, but okay, they tend to be more in favor of at least some kind of common sense gun laws, and then the people who tend to be on the right wing, almost always, I can honestly tell you, I don't think I've ever met a conservative who's in favor of any kind of like a gun law. So that is
you haven't spoken to enough conservatives, because I've spoken to plenty of conservatives from the US who are actually pro. What I find is with your gun laws, right, left, it makes absolutely no difference. There's people on the left who are, and I mean people who are really on the left, who are extremely pro-gun, and then you get people on the right who are in favor of sensible regulations. And I mean, you've got to think. I mean, it can't just be an unfettered rule for everything. I mean, okay, there's a right to bear arms. That doesn't mean everyone gets a bazooka. So there has to be a limit to what people can have, and I think that's where sensible conversations begin. Okay,
so let's just go down a few items real quick. Abortion.
I'm pro-life.
Pro-life, okay. Gay marriage.
But well, sorry, I'll just give a caveat with the pro-life. That's my personal point of view.
Okay.
It's not something that I know enough about, and it's not something that is the biggest issue in the world for me. But I personally am pro-life, and it's because I'm an atheist that I'm staunchly pro-life. Because it's, to me, if I'm a religious person and there's an unborn child, that it all comes down to where you consider life begins. As a religious person, a child who was aborted would be going to heaven. As an atheist, I don't have that luxury. So as an atheist, it's actually made me more firmly pro-life.
So then how do you square that with the fact that there's already 8 billion people on the planet, and there's not that there's not enough resources, because there's more than enough resources to go around, but as it is, there's billions of people already living in poverty. So we're not even taking care of, and I don't know, let me ask you something, Chris. Have you ever physically seen poverty firsthand with your own 2 eyes,
yes,
not on a TV?
Yes, I have.
Where at?
In Australia.
Okay, like, can you elaborate?
Yeah, remote Indigenous communities up in the Northern Territory in Queensland, living well below the poverty line.
You're Aboriginal?
Sorry?
Aboriginal?
Yeah, Indigenous Australians, yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about like total abject poverty, because in America there's a lot of poverty there, but because I've seen poverty.
Incidentally, I'll just quickly answer the other thing that you had asked me after, so it's not skipped. Gay marriage. We had a referendum here. I voted in favour of it. I don't think the government should I don't think the government should regulate any marriage. But as far as I'm concerned, what consenting adults do is up to consenting adults, and it's good.
I think that's a more consistent conservative point, by the way. I mean, personally. I don't consider myself a liberal or a conservative. I'm something in the middle. That's why if you take a look at our emblem over there, it's purple. So because I'm something in between the two. But if I'm just objectively speaking, I would have to say that if I were conservative, I would have to be pro. Well, I don't know about pro gay marriage, but at least because I think it should be legal, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm pro. Like I'm not pro abortion,
Look,
but I don't believe.
the only people who tend to be firmly against same-sex marriage are the ultra religious, and that has nothing to do with left or right. I mean, that generally the right wing position is it's none of the government's business. The government shouldn't be regulating. If it was up to me, the government wouldn't be regulating same-sex marriage or any kind of marriage. If people want to have a ceremony and consider themselves married, that's fine. I'm all for the the person that you've just banned is fine. I know who that is. That's just someone having a bit of a laugh.
I just put him on timeout right now, so human rights can.
Yeah, no, well, it's all good. I'm not worried. I know who it is. He's having a bit of a laugh. He's a good guy. But
yeah, but I mean that's a little.
Yeah, I guess
I don't. Yeah. You know me, so, I don't mind a good laugh, but I mean some of this stuff is like just pushing it. Anyway, okay. What about a universal healthcare?
Yeah, I'm for it. We've got look within reason. We've got probably the best universal healthcare system in the world in Australia.
Better than Korea.
I don't know what Korea is. What's it cost you to go to the doctor?
Well, I guess it depends. I guess it depends on kind of like your income, but it definitely is a universal system. But I mean, if you're like lower income, you could get in there and get out for like. Put like this, even if you didn't have health insurance, you could get in and out of the hospital and get medications and everything for like $50. So I'm not sure if that's because of the subsidies from the government.
Well, in that case, Australia's got a better system.
Okay, good.
Say I break my arm tomorrow. I go to hospital, and they fix me, and then I go home.
No bill?
No.
Wow. Okay, then you. All right. Then
the only thing that there may be a charge for is if you go to, or if you get an ambulance, that you get charged for the ambulance, and that was only because people were misusing ambulances.
Right.
Most people will have some form of private health. So the way our system works in Australia is there's a universal healthcare. But once you earn over a certain amount of money, you pay an additional 1% tax on your income. Okay. But that being said, if you've got private health cover, that tax is lessened. So if you're earning a lot of money, you would probably have private health cover. In which case, there's private hospitals and public hospitals. Both are very good. But there's the only real advantage to going to a private is you might get your own room, and they might get you a little
right. You know, and in South Korea, it's pretty damn cheap. I was talking about if you didn't have health insurance. Here you might have to pay a little bit of money, and the drugs are really cheap too. That was one of the things that's really, really awkward for me, seeing that as an American, because the drugs are so expensive, or the legal drugs, the prescriptions.
Well, I take prescription for blood pressure, right? And so a month's worth. I've just had a quick look at the packet. $6.30 is what it cost me a month.
Quids, but you guys use pounds.
No,
or quids.
No,
dollars. Okay.
Yeah, we're dollars.
All right. So, okay, let me ask you a few other, then we'll get into the question. Did you get a chance to look over the questions that I sent you?
I did. I didn't really. They all looked pretty okay, so I wasn't too worried about any of them.
So, okay. I just have to throw this out that you talked about us having a civil conversation, and I think that's one of the things that I've done that I think really sets me apart from a lot of other channels. Maybe they might be a lot bigger, but I at least don't want to try to shove somebody into a corner and then like get them into a gotcha question. You know what I mean? Because
you're welcome to try and gotcha me. You go for it.
No. But I'm just in general. Those aren't the kind of conversations I want to have. Like I genuinely want to give people a chance to know where at least the conversation might go. obviously it doesn't always go in the direction that you might think it might go. So anyway, let's just do a few other of these, and then yeah, and then we'll get into the actual questions that I sent you. But pro or con death penalty?
Pro, but only for the most extreme and heinous of crimes. Like I'm talking things to do with I don't want to get you demonetized, but crimes against people under the age of 18.
Right. I get you.
Yeah, and certainly the more extreme and heinous criminals. I don't think we need to the taxpayer needs to support them for 50 years in a jail. They can just.
I'm not pro death penalty, but I think we could make an exception to that Snowtown guy, right? Like, I think that should be an issue as conservatives or liberals or libertarians. We should be able to agree to that Snowtown guy. Like, definitely deserves that. And the other guy,
the piece of garbage who did the Port Arthur massacre, he's been locked up in jail for 30 years.
Right.
We're paying. It's the taxpayer is paying for him, so he can live the rest of his life while the innocent, people, including children, be murdered.
Right.
Don't. So no. Look, the only thing is, you would want to be pretty damn sure that there would have to be no doubt about the guilt. But
right.
Yeah, no, stuff them.
I got you. Okay. And then we'll just do one other. This is the last one because this one is really interests me. But what are your thoughts on marijuana?
Yeah. If people want to smoke it, that's fine. I don't think they should smoke it and then jump behind a wheel. Yeah, go for it. It's legal where I am, so.
Well, in public? What about in public?
Yeah. Yes. Look.
Yeah.
Where I live is a bit of an anomaly. It's drugs have been decriminalised, but marijuana where I live, which I think decriminalised drugs is a ridiculously stupid idea. Marijuana isn't. If someone wants to sit at home and smoke a joint, good luck to them. If they want to walk up the road,
that's me.
Smoke, yeah, good luck to them. The only time it would probably be an issue in public is secondhand smoke.
Right.
It's similar to cigarette smoke. Like, I don't want to walk past someone and cop a mouthful of secondhand smoke, particularly if it's marijuana and I'm about to jump behind the wheel.
Right. And you know what? I was recently, last year I was I try to take one trip a year, but last year I was in the Netherlands, the UK, and I got off on the train, and literally this is my introduction to the Netherlands. I get off the train, and as I'm walking, I see this guy, he looks like a Muslim, like a very darker guy. I don't know, like an Arab guy, and or Arab or Indian, and he pulls out a joint and starts smoking it. And then the guy on the train track is like, "Oh, you can't smoke here." And he just put it out and he walked away. I was like, "Oh my God, they're so much more tolerant here than they are in other places." But anyway, I'm a Christian, but I definitely do believe that that's something that God created for us to enjoy in moderation. Same thing with alcohol. But yeah, definitely doing so out in public or behind the wheel.
Most things in moderation are fine.
Right.
When it comes to drugs like meth and
right.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely
I better get to these questions.
I have harsher laws.
Okay, so I better get to these questions because I want to keep this around an hour, and we've already killed 25 minutes here.
Sorry, I'm just going to apologize really quickly because I just ate on camera, which is a big no-no. The last number of streams I've been doing have been audio only, so I've gotten into a few bad habits. So I apologize.
You're totally good. I didn't even notice. I didn't even notice. But okay. So what's it like to be a conservative in the atheist community? That's the first question I have you, and I got to re-up right now. But I can hear you. So just I'll be off of the screen for a second. So just go ahead and answer that question. What is it like to be a conservative in the atheist community? Go.
All right, don't take too long because it's a really simple answer. it is what it is. It's being a conservative in the atheist community isn't as uncommon as people think. There's this perception out there that the atheist community is just full of people on the left or the far left, and it's completely false. There's a lot of people who are in the center, on the right. There's all different parts of the political spectrum within the atheist community. There's certain things that most atheists will agree on politically. Generally, things like separation of church and state. Better, I guess, fairer rules when it comes to non-believers, and then there's plenty we'll disagree on. I think it's just like any group of people and any organization. In fact, one of the biggest upcoming atheist groups in the United States is a group called Atheists for Liberty, headed by a really, really awesome guy called Thomas Sheedy, and they've also got on their board of directors a guy called David Silverman, and they're not necessarily all on the right. They certainly do tend to be more conservative. I think they would describe themselves as an atheist group that isn't woke, or that is actively non-woke. But certainly, so, I guess there's a lot of kindred spirits for me there.
Right. Okay. So let's imagine a spectrum.
Incidentally, am I allowed to swear on this podcast or not?
Yeah, please. Good.
Okay, cool. I almost dropped something, and I had to use my my training from the past as a pastor to not drop that naughty word.
I really don't give a good goddamn if you cuss or not. Honestly, it does not. I mean, don't scummer. We're talking the other day, and I think
I'm not going to go stupid. It's just the occasional
right.
naughty word drops out.
I was talking to Scummer, and he was like, I think that people have this idea that, I know certainly as American, maybe it's because of like shows like Downtown Abbey, where you're like, you've seen them and they're like all snooty and uppity, upper class and stuff, and you assume that they all talk all proper and everything. But then you actually talk to people from England, and those guys drop profanity like you would not believe, man.
Oh yeah, the further north you go, the worse it gets. Right.
So yeah, that's a total myth that those guys are all proper and everything. That's a total. I've seen it firsthand. But anyway, yeah, just don't. I
came from somewhere.
I have an issue with gratuitous profanity or gratuitous violence. Like, I am a very strong proponent that Quentin Tarantino is one of the worst directors who have ever existed. Because
is hit and miss.
Because the thing is with him is that the violence and the profanity is just gratuitous. And for me, it's like whenever you have overly sexualized content in whatever direction you're taking it, like that just shows that you lack a general creativity, where like you have to rely on, like, let's say like bathroom humor. If you have to rely on bathroom humor or sexual humor throughout the entire movie, like that shows you're not a very creative person. So
I'd push back against that, because what I'd say is maybe that's not your type of humor, but if people weren't buying it, it wouldn't exist. I mean, Tarantino is successful because people go and see his movies. So,
well, people like violence. People like to be scared. That doesn't mean that that they're creative. Like they're creative, or like have ingenuity behind them. So, for example, like,
but if he wasn't, everyone would do it. You just go and write a movie tomorrow, and it'd be a hit.
Okay. So one of the movies. Then since you want to push back, if you see like a movie like Dumb and Dumber. Okay, so for example, a lot of the humor that's going on in that, if you watch Dumb and Dumber, which I believe, in my own personal opinion, is the funniest movie of all time. But that is there is such creative humor beyond it. There is some slapstick comedy behind it. That's obviously going on if you watch the movie. And because slapstick comedy, anybody could fall down and everyone find it funny, or slam a pie in someone's face. Anyone's going to find that funny. But the thing is to the level of creativity behind it, and having to really think about the humor that's going on. To me, I don't think I've ever seen a movie better than Dumb and Dumber, and does have comedy humor. I mean, it does have
It's
sexual.
interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that, and toilet humor, because I've only seen my grandfather cry one time in my life, and it was when I was a kid, and Dumb and Dumber came out, and the scene where he's on the toilet in Dumb and Dumber, my grandfather was in tears, and he wasn't the overly laughing type, but he was in tears. This was the funniest thing he'd ever seen.
I'm saying it's not an over reliance on it, though. There's not because it does.
But humor is subjective. Creativity is subjective.
All right, but if you're just relying on fart jokes, and if you're relying on sexual, like, anybody's going to find that funny, is what I'm saying. Sexual humor, slapstick humor, anyone's going to find that funny. So finding stuff that takes creativity. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in this, but I do want to go on to the next question. But that is an interesting, because we could go on and on about this, but I don't like gratuitous. I couldn't give two shits if you use profanity, but if you're just saying like effity this, effity that, because I've done construction before.
It's not my style.
Yeah, I've done construction before though, Chris, and those guys, like, they literally, the word profane, like, they use what the actual meaning of profanity is, because they'll be like, yeah, I effing went to the store and I bought an effing Coke, and then I effing opened, and you're like, what? The whole purpose of profanity is supposed to be that, like, you can emphasize something or stress something, and they're just using it to, like, yeah, I effing did this or I effing did that. But anyway, I have an issue with it just because it shows a lack of creativity. But anyway, next question is, should there be any barrier of entry or gatekeeping amongst this atheist community? What are your thoughts on that?
No, there shouldn't be. There is a little bit from certain segments of it, the so-called atheist leaders, and I'll use it, atheist leaders, and some of the louder voices online. I think they're more interested in left-wing political causes than atheism. It's atheism sort of like number 3 or 4 on their list after they go through everything else. They gatekeep, but I mean they're a minority. Most people within the atheist community just get on. It's Jeff, godless scummer. Me and him couldn't be more politically opposed. I mean, he's a left-wing unionist. I'm a right-wing conservative. But we get on great. We're good mates.
Right.
We have some interesting conversations. We have disagreements. But that doesn't change that anything. We are still part of the same community. We're both atheists. He doesn't turn around and say, well, you don't think right, you don't believe right, so you are not an atheist. What I find is the people who tend to act that way, they're still in religion. All they do is they replace their pastor with Matt Dillahunty. So everything he says must be right. And look, and some people will go through that phase, it's as they're jumping out of religion, they're looking for familiarity, they're looking for something to cling on to. If they've been hurt coming out of religion, I guess they're looking for somewhere to vent their anger, and people like that will give them that opportunity to vent their anger. But no, there shouldn't be any gatekeeping. What little gatekeeping there is really has nothing to do with the atheist community as a whole. It's just a few individuals.
Then I have to ask you this question because when we had our debate,
I know where you're going. Don't worry, I've got the answer.
No, I'm curious. Okay, where do you think I'm going with this then?
Atheism cult.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow, yeah. You're okay. So the thing, what I was going to tell you is that
Jesus told me you were going to say that. So
what was that?
Jesus told me you were going to say that.
Okay, there you go. So well, the question I was going to ask you is actually a bit different than that, but it is related though, because I will tell you this, that, well, I told you this in our very first discussion, the very first time we talked, and the reason why I was drinking, because if I'm not drinking, there's going to be a natural reluctancy to kind of broach some issues that I would try to avoid because I don't like confrontation. So I try to avoid it at all costs. But when I start drinking, then I'm like, okay, maybe I'll talk about something that maybe I wouldn't do otherwise, and because there's a natural fear that I have to offend people. But It's like, okay, if I have a few, I've had three now, but I'll be more open to discuss something. You know what I mean? That I would try to avoid just entirely if I hadn't done it. You know what I'm saying? So
Yep.
there's a nervousness that I have that a few beers. If I have 10 beers, you're not going to understand anything I have to say. But if I have
Yeah.
like three or four, then okay.
With your accent, I can't understand a thing you're saying regardless.
Okay. So then why is it that you take such offense to someone like me then saying that when I look at the way that I see this community operating, you guys, maybe not just be you in particular, but I just see this as the same kind of groupthink, the same kind of dogma, the same kind of exclusionary us versus them that like people say that cults or religions do. Like I don't see any kind of difference. I don't see any kind of difference there. So why is it that someone like you would get offensive if I say, hey, you guys are out criticizing religion, but I see a whole religion arising amongst you guys?
Because you're wrong.
Okay, explain.
Because what you're doing is you're lumping all atheists under the one umbrella. Now there's loud atheist voices out there. There's people who, particularly in the angry atheist side of things, who they're more obsessed with religion and talking about religion and hating religion than people who are in religion. People like that, I consider them religious. Like they're on a crusade. Ultimately, as a species, humans are tribal. We like to defend our tribe. We like to stick to our tribe. Now, okay, the hat I'm wearing, that's from the team I support, the Dragons. Now, if I were to walk up the street and see someone in a dragon shirt, I'm going to naturally have an affinity or think, oh, I like that person because they're part of the same tribe that I'm in. Now, if I see someone in a dragon shirt having a fight with someone, our arch rivals are the Sharks, having a fight with someone in a Sharks shirt, I'm naturally going to initially want to side with the person who's from my tribe. That's the way things, and that's humanity everywhere, regardless. Now, why I took offense to you saying that atheism was a cult was because there's so much variety of thought within atheism. People look at the atheist leaders and think that that's what the atheist community is. That isn't. They're just the people who happen to have profiles. They have audiences because they appeal to the angry atheists, the people who are just getting out of religion and who are looking for something. And in a lot of cases, they do replace the pastor or the religious leader. Some people will eventually get over it. Some people will hang on to it because it gives them a group, a sense of community to be in. But the variety of thought within the atheist community is huge. Like I'm sitting here. When I first became an atheist, I thought I'm going to be the only conservative atheist that there is. It was a real scary thing for me. In fact, the first video I ever did on my channel, the first live stream I ever did, was "Can atheists be conservatives?" I've taken it down for other reasons that I won't get into now, but that was the first conversation because I thought I'm going to be the only one, and as I've been on this journey, I've discovered no, actually, I'm probably in the majority. It's just that the loud online voices,
right? That's interesting.
that tend to scream. Most atheists just get on with their life. It really, I mean, for me, okay, I'm an atheist, but it's like about the 743rd most interesting thing about me. It doesn't define who I am. It defines what I believe. Now, I guess it played a big part for me because I came from such a strong religious background. I mean, hell, I was preaching in churches, and now all of a sudden I'm an atheist. So it's something that was hugely impactful in my life. But look, to me, what I believe, what I don't believe, really, that's for me. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Right. So was it a bit of a scandal then whenever you became an atheist, like amongst your church?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. There was people who were some of what I thought were my closest friends who I haven't spoken to since. I had a guy he was my housemate. I introduced him to his wife. I was groomsman at his wedding, organised his
Wow.
bucks night. I used to lead the small group. We went through a lot of stuff together. Like I knew him before I was married. He knew me before he was married. We went through a lot of stuff together. And when I deconverted, he went a bit funny on me. And I just, I said to him, look, I'm still the same person, still your friend. Like, it's religion was a part of what we did, but it wasn't everything. It's like we went to church on a Sunday and we might see each other at, if one of us was running a youth group or something like that on a Friday, or a small group on every now and then, we might see each other. But I mean, ultimately, it didn't change who I was. And I sat down and had the conversation with him, and it really went in one ear and out the other as I was explaining to him what was going on. And the irony is he was using the apologetics he was trying to use on me to get me back with the apologetics I'd taught him. I'm just like, mate,
wow.
I taught you this stuff. Like, come on, give me a break. That's why I always laugh when people use apologetics on me. I was like, come on, like I could do better than this.
So Chris,
but he just cut me. Unfriended me on Facebook, and this is someone I've had a 10-year relationship with.
Right. So I do want to say one thing, that if that guy is listening, or if any other Christian is listening who's lost an atheist friend, my best friend on the planet, the guy who I told you when I was in college, we used to go for a picture every night and talk about all kinds of philosophy. And we're in Bible college, we're in Bible college, and we're doing this every Friday night. We're going out for drinks, and he'd smoke on his tobacco pipe, and we talk about all kinds of, philosophy. Of course, this is 20 years ago, so I didn't know anything about life, really. I didn't get to experience the world. But we talk about whatever we experienced, up to that point. But my best friend, he, to my dying day, if I got him on my deathbed, I'll say this guy's my best friend. But he didn't judge me. He didn't defriend me. He kept talking to me. Even I paid for him to come here to South Korea to come visit me, and because he's just like my best friend in the planet. And he came here, and we got to talking, and he didn't judge me. He didn't say anything to try to hurt me. It's such an and if I had 1% alive about religion, it was because of that guy. He kept the 99% of me that was totally anti-God. He kept that 1% alive for me. But anyway, I do want to go on to the question number 3. But before I do want to say that atheism is a cult. But do you feel that the left wing of the party has become intolerant and victim of groupthink? What are your thoughts on that?
All right. So hang on. So the left wing of which party?
The atheist party. Sorry, that was maybe a little bit.
Do I think the left wing of the atheist movement?
And I'm going to re-up again, so just keep going.
Okay. Certain aspects of what I would say the extreme left or the woke left are intolerant. There's no two ways about it. There's plenty on the left who aren't. There's plenty on the right who are intolerant. You get intolerances on both sides and the middle of the political spectrum. It's unavoidable. I think there's certain elements within the atheist community that are intolerant shitbags, to be honest. I think that they're, as I was saying earlier, I think they're, atheism for them, while they use atheist organizations and an atheist identity to promote themselves, atheism's not that high on the list for them. It's just the catalyst or the vehicle that they use to promote everything else. I think that there's the social justice woke left is a massive issue within the atheist community. I think that they put a lot of people off. There's an impression that they represent the majority when they most certainly do not. They are an extreme minority. They're just a very vocal minority. Are they intolerant? Yes, they are. I think the extreme left in general is an extremely intolerant group, as is the extreme right. I think both extreme elements are horribly intolerant, racist pieces of shit.
Racist on both sides. I agree with that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Look, you can't sit there and I always laugh when, it's, and I know we'll touch on this a bit later because I know what questions are coming up, but the way that some on the left are acting towards Jewish people at the moment, the anti-Semitism that's out there is insane. The anti-white rhetoric. I mean, when did it become okay to segregate people? I mean, it's segregation in the US got outlawed in the 1960s, but now it's back. Mm-hmm. There's a funny video that Ryan Long did a couple of years ago. It's got a racist person and a social justice warrior, or a racist and an anti-racist meet up and have a conversation. And it turns out they agree on everything. That's the joke. It's like segregation is good. It's the racist says, oh, it's white men shouldn't be with black women because they're just fetishizing them, and the racist goes, yes, I feel the same, and that's the reality. The extremes of both sides suck. The woke left and the woke right are both equally stupid.
Okay, so
the other though.
So this is the question I wanted to ask you. Like, so let's say there's a spectrum, and by the way, are you actually drinking?
I'm going to disappoint you, mate. It's a 0%.
Oh God! Mate. I just pulled out the all-American beer right here. So I shouldn't actually be supporting them.
Well, anyway. so long as it's not Bud Light, that's okay. No. I had quit drinking for 6 months. Now I will drink whiskey. I took it back up over Christmas. I knew you were coming, or I thought you were coming, so I kind of had to ease myself into it.
You thought I was coming.
With the beer, the 0 is fine. If they make a 0% whiskey that actually tastes good, I might take it up.
So Chris, imagine the spectrum that so like with sexuality as well, there's like a spectrum, right? Like the few people who are like the most extreme, like Elton John's, or like the straightest, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's or Don Juan's, excuse me. Those are like the spectrum. Like most people are lying between, like, if you put on in 1 through 10, most people are like the 2s or 3s or the 8s or 9s, like as far as attraction goes. So there's very few people who are 10s and 1s. Okay. So same thing politically. There's very few people who are like the actual, like, we line item just agree with everything that the Republican Party stands for. Like they might agree with like 90% of it, but there's some things that they might actually be consistent.
No. I think people who are into politics, they will tend to back the position of their side regardless.
Okay, but some of that might be from that's besides the point, because some of that might be from actual pressure that you're experiencing from your party. But if you just intellectually,
I think it's tribal. I've heard people who will make a political argument. Okay, I'll give you a classic example. In Australia, same-sex marriage. There were politicians on the left who were pushing for a referendum on same-sex marriage, and at the time, the right-wing government wasn't having any bar of it. Anyway, then everything sort of started to change a little bit, and the left-wing parties, I think, put 27 bills to Parliament to legalise same-sex marriage, and it got voted down pretty much every time. So the right-wing government in Australia actually said, all right, well, we're going to have a referendum. We'll have a referendum and we'll see what the people want to do with same-sex marriage. Then all of a sudden, those same people who were on the left, who had been advocating for it only a few years earlier, came up with every reason why it shouldn't happen. And the only thing that had changed was the sides were saying different things. So one side was saying one thing, the other side was saying that, then it flipped, and all of a sudden people were arguing against their position from a few years ago.
So, let me try to finish the point, what I'm trying to say here, because most people are not at a 100% or 0% on the spectrum. There might be some issues in which they agree or disagree, or at least they might say that they agree with it, but they actually don't personally agree with it. That being said, if you were on a spectrum, let's say a Republican, right winger, conservative, Republican, whatever that means to you, as far as that spectrum, where would you rate as far as being 0 is your like the most left wing, blue haired liberal, nose ring liberal out there, and then like the most like a communist, but the right wing is more the most extreme right wing capitalist, you know, as far right as you could possibly get. Where would you rate on that spectrum?
I don't think you can put a number on it, and the only reason I say that is because there's certain things that I'm more right on than others. I mean, socially, I'm pretty liberal. Like, you know, it's I'm not a full blown libertarian or anything like that, but you know, it's things like same-sex marriage, marijuana, stuff like that. Yeah,
Sure.
it's people can do what they want, but economically, you know, as far as yeah, I'm definitely conservative economically. I'm pro business, you know. I'm you know,
Right.
pro small government. I think there's too many different factors to sort of go, but I mean, look, I would say that I guess to try and answer your question, um, I'm more to the right of the right than the center.
So let's just say, would you be like in, so then that would maybe put you on the 75, 80% range?
It would depend. It's hard to say because I don't know what the metrics we're
Well,
sort of
I'm just trying to
going
give you a
against.
general. Okay, so
Look,
let's say me,
I'm 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 not a centrist. I'm absolutely conservative. I'm absolutely on the right. You know, I think I'm nowhere near the extreme. You know, I'm not sort of going to the authoritarian right, the same as I'm sure you're not going to the authoritarian left. Um, but no, look, I'm if you had a spectrum of the right, I'm probably to the right of the middle of that.
right. So I
But
would say I'm to the left of the middle. So I would personally put myself between the 60 to like 55% range, which I'm slightly leaning left, but um, I am not like full blown everything that the Democrats say is like scripture. You know, I'm not going to
oh,
go, and
no,
I
no,
wouldn't even hold on, hold on. I wouldn't
I don't
identify
think the
myself.
parties
I wouldn't
ahead of.
identify myself. Hold on, Chris. I would identify myself as either political party. I would say I agree with more of your platform if we want to go straight light item. But as far as generally speaking, I agree with some of the stuff you say, and I disagree with some of the stuff you say as well. Good.
Look, I don't think the political party should be the metric by which you judge because political policies change depending on what's happening at the time. Do I agree with everything? I guess the right wing party here in Australia is the Liberal Party or the Liberal National Party. Well, they're the mainstream one. There's other right wing parties, but if I go by them, I definitely don't agree with everything that they say.
Right.
You know, am I going to vote for them at the next election? Most likely, because
Right. Right.
they're more closely aligned to my views and values than the left
So,
wing party.
so I do want to say this before I go on to the next point, but this this is honestly so absurd to me because I've lived like over 10 years overseas, and so only seeing two parties is just such an anathema to me. It is so obnoxious that you should try to represent, at this point you're pushing 400 million people like in America, that you would think two parties represent that many people. Like there's more diversity amongst Skittles or Starbursts or you know, Dorito flavors that than just two that are going to represent the entire population. So there's people who have a variety of different views, and so you have to have like, you should have at least, I think I would think the bare minimum would be you'd need at least five. Five would be the minimum, maybe seven would be a happy medium, and maybe like nine would be a good variety as far as parties you have to have room for the extreme left, the extreme right. I see those as vital parts because, I live very close to North Korea, and North Korea is I've been there personally, and I've seen that what happens whenever you have just one strain of thought take over, and that's freaking dangerous. You know what I mean? That's cultish, and you need a right wing and you need a left wing to soar. And if you're in a car and you're veering to the right and you're veering to the left, in some way or another, that's going to cause some kind of accident or trouble. So you have to have a good balance between the two. And I believe that both parties are like completely necessary to, or having a variety of different views to keep things like not going totally awry. What are your thoughts on that?
I disagree with you. I actually think two-party systems are good. And the reason I say that, I've been involved with smaller parties and I've been involved with bigger parties. And Australia, very similar to the US, is a two-party system. We've got other parties that will get, someone elected here or there, and a couple of members of the Senate or something like that.
Like Green?
No, the Greens are fucking crazy. But the Greens are a good example. They probably get about 10% of the vote generally. And then we've got the right-wing equivalent, which is One Nation. They probably get about 8 to 10% of the vote. And then the other 80% is the two major parties. What I like about major parties is you can actually have a variety of voices within those parties. You get an exchange of ideas within those parties. So the Liberal Party, for instance, former Prime Minister of Australia, a guy called John Howard, greatest Prime Minister we ever had, he said that the Liberal Party was a broad church. There was a lot of different ideas. We had classic liberals, people sort of more towards the left. We had, staunch conservatives. We had a great variety in the middle. The nice thing is these groups get together, work together, exchange ideas, and find middle ground. Same thing happens on the left. In our Labor Party, you've got people who are the Labor left and Labor right, and you know what, they come together and they work out a good balance. And I think ultimately being able to share that is better when you've got just a lot of small groups. Depending on how things fall, certain groups can get power. Now, imagine if you've got a situation, and we've seen this in Australia, where you've got the two major parties are sitting there with about, let's say, 47% of the ultimate vote, or 47% of the seats each. And then you've got this small fringe of about, 5 or 6% in the middle. That 5 or 6% has all the power. They've got the balance because they can determine who's in government. They can determine which way every single vote goes. And I think that's dangerous. I genuinely don't like that. We saw that in 2010 in Australia, where we had what was called a minority parliament, where basically a couple of independent politicians from regional New South Wales and one green lunatic essentially controlled the balance of power in the country.
Interesting.
It was whichever way they went, that was how it was going to go, because the major parties were always going to vote with themselves.
Really quick, what are your thoughts on someone like John McCain, who is okay, I'm conservative, I'm Republican, this is my heart, this is my core, but I'm not going to go along with bullshit. Like, you guys represent bullshit, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say something about it. What are your thoughts on someone like that who's known as being like a maverick in the Senate?
I think there's a place for them. I think generally, if you're going to be in a party, I think you've got to align with core values. You couldn't be a hardcore Democrat who decides to run as a Republican, or vice versa. That's not going to work. But I think ultimately, if you're a senator, you're there to represent a state, and your job is to certainly, yes, you're elected as a member of a party, and there's an expectation that your values are going to align with that party. But ultimately, you are there as the representative for that state, or if it's in Congress or the House of Representatives here in Australia, you are representing an area. And I think that there's a fiduciary obligation for people to represent those areas with the best of intentions, certainly aligning with the values that they've been elected on. But
no, that makes sense.
I've got no problem with with people who go a little bit rogue sometimes, so long as they're not making a habit of it.
So, okay. So I do want to try to get to these last couple of questions because I like to keep these around an hour, but we've been talking about so many things. But I do want to ask you one thing because I do want to set something up real quick, this question. Mm-hmm. Because you should know this. People who are interested in history are like a rare breed because most people, when they start hearing about history, they get bored to tears. It's one of the things that it's not something. I know this because I'm a history teacher, so I know that it's hard to get people interested into that, right? But if you're in the breed who actually is interested in that, it takes something there has to be, we're like a rare minority and we're a rare breed. But I can tell you this from my own personal experience. When I was 9 years old, the Soviet Union fell, and my teacher showed us out of all things, she showed us a picture of the first McDonald's opening up in Russia. And she showed us this line that stretched around the block multiple times. They had to drive around the block for 2 minutes. And that to me just blew my mind because I couldn't believe it that many people were waiting to get into McDonald's when in America there's a McDonald's on every corner. So when she told me what had happened as far as the Soviet Union collapsing, that stirred such a curiosity on why people wouldn't have access to McDonald's. That was literally my train of thought as a 9-year-old. But that's what got me obsessed.
Blue jeans.
What?
Blue jeans were the other big thing.
Right. Exactly. And music too. Really, it's music and Pepsi that destroyed the Soviet Union. Music, Pepsi, and jeans that really was their downfall. But I do want to ask you what got you so interested in history. And if you could kind of tell me your origins of that, and then we'll get on to the last few questions, because I'm genuinely curious from one history nut to the other.
It was a good high school teacher. In my last 2 years, I didn't do history for most of high school because I had a bad history teacher in year 8. So anyway, year 11, which is the year 11 and 12 of the last 2 years, I was actually in economics, and I went to 2 classes, and I just thought, this is boring and it's not me. My best friend at the time was doing history and had a teacher who I knew the teacher. I'd had him before, and he was a cool teacher. So I went and did history, and that was it. I was hooked. It was a good history teacher who got me hooked. I've been addicted ever since. And now ultimately I'm making a career of it. See, I've been too brief there, and he's run away.
No, I'm here.
It's okay.
No, that's good. Yeah, it was actually this. There's 2 teachers that made a really strong impact in my life.
I'm just going to quickly run. I'm still listening though.
Okay, yeah, good. I was listening well when I re-upped, but there were 2 the 2 history teachers that made a really strong impact in my life, and one of them actually had a sickle and hammer flag in their classroom, and it was there to represent just a diversity of views. And I remember I was working at this church, and I had this Chinese communist propaganda up on the wall, and these people from my church came over and well, this is South Korea, but they were oh, what is that there? Are you supportive of that? And I'm like, no, it's just the idea of having a diversity of views and recognizing the propaganda and understanding what it is, just seeing it as history, just seeing it as history and wanting to not erase it, but understand where we get from history, how we've got here, and that we need not celebrate it. We shouldn't celebrate the Confederates or whatever, but we should definitely keep it in our memory that these things have happened and they have shaped where we are right now. And to erase it and to forget about it is dangerous, and so we have to recognize.
It's important. We've got to understand history. I think we need to know. I think it helps us understand who we are now. How did we get here? You know, I see a lot of things that happen in the world, and you know, I see a lot of parallels with things that have happened in the past, and obviously lessons that we haven't learned. But yeah, look, history is just, it's one of those things that's fascinating for me. And yeah, there's been plenty of times where people will come over and see my book collection, and I'll have to explain why some of those books are on my shelf, and you just explain, oh, it's just history. Like, you know, if I've got a book like Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, that's not because I like those 1930s and 40s German people. It's because it's an area of history that is interesting, that certainly has shaped the modern world. It's certainly, its history gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think everybody should read Mein Kampf to have an idea, like how humans. No, but you have to understand how humans could treat people so inhumanely, because that I've seen some inhumane treatment studying, but you have to understand. Like, okay. So if you're going to challenge me on this, I will tell you this. Okay, great, Chris. Don't cut me off.
Okay.
I've been to North Korea, and I have seen what it is like to have propaganda on every wall. Okay, because going in before I went to North Korea, I would have said the Germans were just absolute crazy and nutty, and I would have probably even said evil, because my mom raised me to have this disdain for German people, because she was so pro-Israel. She would tell me literally growing up that like there was something genetically wrong about German people, that they could do something this evil to anybody, right? And I grew up believing that, and it wasn't until I actually got out and started meeting German people to seeing that my mom was totally wrong about this issue, that something had taken root in that country that had totally brainwashed and gotten, because a lot of those people were either Lutheran or Catholic, right? And when I went to North Korea and I saw the level of indoctrination that was going on there firsthand, Chris, because I'm talking about seeing this firsthand. I mentioned this before, and you mentioned seeing people in Australia, but I'm talking about, you're talking about first world poverty that exists inside of the first world there in Australia. I've seen it existing in the third world, maybe even the fourth, calling it the fourth world, where it's in a completely different level of poverty, where like what I've seen in Haiti, where people are living in buildings that have been halfway destroyed, who are on the verge of falling down and killing the people who are living inside of there. I've actually seen that firsthand. So when you see these kind of things firsthand, what I've seen in North Korea, I could understand when I was there and I saw the propaganda on the wall and the music and everything that was going on there. I could totally see how these people could get brainwashed into this line of thinking. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean people should read Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is overrated. It's the ramblings of a political prisoner who had very grandiose ideas, but realistically shouldn't have achieved any of them. Hitler was a nothing. He was a nobody.
Right.
You know, the Nazis were just like a very small fringe minor party. They gained traction a few years before they actually managed to get into power, and then they kind of bullied and forced their way into power at a time where there was hyperinflation in Germany, the economy had completely collapsed, people were desperate, and they sung the right message at the right time. Otherwise, if it wasn't for the Great Depression, it never would have happened. But I mean, there's propaganda everywhere. Look, okay, if I turn on CNN, I am going to see American left-wing propaganda. If I turn on Fox News, I'm going to see American right-wing propaganda. If I go and watch a TV show on Disney Plus, I'm probably going to see left-wing propaganda.
Right.
Wedged in there. It's propaganda exists. It's everywhere.
So let me explain this, because I don't want anybody to give the false impression of what anybody would think, that why I'm talking about reading Mein Kampf is like important, or people should do it for like any kind of, any kind of reasons other than just to understand how something such garbage could resonate in people's minds, which is what I'm talking about. Okay. So let's contrast the difference between how Germany was treated between World War I and World War II. Okay. And same thing with Japan, because after World War II, the Marshall Plan helped to rebuild both Germany and Japan, because we understood something philosophically, that like if you depress a people and you get people to such a point where they have no hope, no future, um, not be addressed with other sources. Okay, so if you get people to that point of desperation, then someone as idiotic as such a monster as Hitler might actually come up and be able to take control and to capture the thoughts and the imagination of a people like Germany. So you have to be able to understand that if you demoralize the people and you give them crippling debts that they have no way of paying, and you take all their resources from them, that chances are that they're going to have something inside of that country that's going to cause them to have some kind of like revolt, or whatever it is that took place inside.
Are you talking post World War One Germany?
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think any historian wouldn't be able to take a look at what happened after World War One and say that there was some kind of connection between what happened after World War One and World War Two. Okay, there's a connection here.
Well, everything's connected, but the Weimar Republic was probably the most free, forward-thinking liberal democracy in the world. It was very short-lived because of the Great Depression. But the Weimar Republic, no, that was if I could live anywhere in the 1920s, you would want to live in the Weimar Republic in Germany. You just want to get out by the 30s. It was forward thinking. It had the best universities. It had the best liberal arts scene. Even things like homosexuality wasn't. I mean, it wasn't openly embraced, but it wasn't really frowned on either. It was a really forward thinking liberal democracy. But what happens is you get the aftermath of, certainly the Treaty of Versailles was extremely restrictive, and there was elements within that treaty that would impact later, but a lot of it initially was the people in Germany didn't understand why they were surrendering, because the propaganda they'd been given was they were winning the war. I mean, the war hadn't come to Germany. I mean, they were in France. They were in Belgium. So Germany wasn't necessarily under threat, but all of a sudden they surrendered, and the German people felt they'd been betrayed, and that was the message that sort of got out there. We've been betrayed. But then there's a period of prosperity in Germany after that. Now, the Great Depression hits, and it hit Germany particularly hard because not only did they have the effects of the Great Depression, but they also had these huge debts that they had to pay
Right.
as part of the war that not every nation was prepared to kind of let off. The Americans actually kind of sort of said, it's all right. They let a few slide, and they were trying to work with them. But by that time, hyperinflation takes off, people are losing their jobs everywhere. And then all of a sudden you get this charismatic orator who comes out and starts talking about rebuilding and everything he was going to do for Germany, instilling a sense of German pride that they may not have had post-war. But
okay,
I think it oversimplifies it to say that World War One caused World War II, and certainly post-World War II. I mean, things like the Marshall Plan. The reason the Marshall Plan was there, it wasn't because there was this this understanding that they needed to rebuild Germany. No, it's because Germany was split in two, and it was smack bang on the border against the new enemy, the Soviet Union, the communist bloc. That was all that was. Germany was built up because Germany is a strong industrial Western power, regardless of who's in charge of it. It was a bulwark against the Soviets.
Right. Okay, but but that right there, though, what I'm trying, I think the bigger picture of what I'm trying to say here is that the way that the way that we treat people who have been defeated, that's what I'm really trying to get to, is that we have to try to see situations after wars where, yeah, it's very easy. It's very easy to say you're the person wrong for, you've done this wrong and we need to punish you. But the harder thing, and the thing that's going to move us forward, Chris, is that where we're trying to build people up, where we're trying to not I guess this gets into politics somewhat, because as far as punitive damages is, in the system, and in the system, as far as what I'm talking, sorry, like the government and trying to get retribution to get people who've committed crimes. Let's just say that. What should be the actual goal is to try to get people to a point where they're not going to commit crimes in the future, right? Rehabilitation, trying to help people to be self-sufficient, and if they have some kind of mental conditions, to try to get over that. I think I'm speaking to just
within reason. I think SS commanders who gassed people to death, no, there's no rehabilitation.
Yeah, Snowtown is not going to get rehabilitated. We obviously know that, right?
Yeah, it's someone like Hitler. I mean, you can't rehabilitate that. People.
Right, I agree. Okay.
People make decisions, and it's.
But let's talk about the most extreme. You're talking about the most extreme conditions, right? I'm talking about people, countries. Okay, countries make mistakes, right? You would agree with that. And you know what? Let's just get into the last question, because these last two questions, because this will come up, right?
I think it's going to be pretty relevant, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is actually, exactly. But why do you think that so many liberal sides have chosen to side with the liberal side, have chosen to side with Palestine? And I do want to give a little bit of context to this, because I have actually spent some time in Palestine myself. And so I have seen a couple of things. One is that Palestinians, that's actually a weird word to even say in the first place, because you could technically argue that people in Israel are Palestinian as well, right? Because what?
They are.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a weird. I think they might. You could even say they're both Semitic. You know what I mean? That's another weird thing to say, anti-Semitic, because people who are anti-Arab are called anti-Semitic, or or people who are anti-Israel are called anti-Semitic. But you could also say the same thing for anti-Arab people. But anyway, the point being is that I've been there, and I've seen that the average, like, Abu or your average Ali who's just living their life down in Palestine, like, they just want to go to work and take care of their family. Like the people who are on the extremes, the leaders, they're not the minority. It's the same thing. You talk about the atheist community. The people who are like the most vocal, who are like, they're on the most extreme. The average guy is just trying to go to work. You know what I mean? He wants to buy food for his family. So I've seen these guys, and I've interacted with them firsthand. So I definitely know that trying to judge everybody by Hamas themselves is not an accurate thing to do, right? But this situation that's happening there, it seems like a lot of liberals have chosen to side with the Arab or Palestinian side, and I'm curious on what are your thoughts on that, because I do want to break that down a little bit more, having seen it firsthand myself.
Do you want the simple answer as to why they do?
No, I want it simple and difficult, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
I got to re-up too.
All right. Well, okay. The simple answer is it's a hangover from the Cold War. When Israel first became a state, the Soviet Union thought that Israel might ally itself with the Soviet Union, because it was the Russians who liberated a lot of the ghettos, certainly in Eastern Europe and places like that. Or they liberated the ghettos, they liberated the concentration camps. So they thought that would happen. And Ben Gurion initially said that when they formed Israel, they wanted to have their own country, that was, didn't rely on other people, didn't rely on the West. So there was a natural feeling that that Israel would fall eventually into the Soviet bloc. But they didn't. They ended up allying themselves or aligning themselves more closely with America. And as a result, they fell into that side of the Cold War. So in 1973, the Yom Kippur War, what a lot of people don't realize is, yes, the neighboring Arab countries certainly invaded and attacked Israel, but they also had tanks and troops from Cuba and North Korea. It was a proxy war. It was a proxy part of the Cold War. It was just a very
Really, I did not know that.
Yep. Yeah, you can, and
that's news to me.
Yeah, so basically, I guess the modern woke left. Look, I'm not too worried about what that person says. I mean, it just looks like it's a troll in the chat. The anti-atheist comments. Then it's I could say that the sky was blue, and they'd say that anyone who supports a blue sky is evil. So whatever.
Actually, hold on, because this is going to come up right here, because I do want to say this. It seems like, in my opinion, the reason why is because they're just reacting. Yeah, they're just reacting to Christianity. They see this as like a weak point because they know a lot of Christians support, Israel. So they see it as like a thorn in the side that they get attacked. So do you agree with that?
No.
Go ahead. Explain.
No, not really. People from all walks of life, some are pro-Israel, some are not. There's a lot of people on the left who are very pro-Israel, and certainly are believers. I mean, I'm an atheist. I'm very pro-Israel. In this conflict, I am absolutely pro-Israel. It is a black and white issue for me.
Why is that?
Because on October 7, 1,200 people were murdered. Some of the most horrendous crimes were committed against young people, family, children. I mean, children were murdered. I mean, women had horrific sexual violence. It was probably the worst case of gendered violence since the Holocaust. I mean, this was a horrendous and planned attack. Israel has every right to respond and retaliate. Every single right. What country wouldn't? If that happened to the United States, I can assure you they would. Oh, well, I mean, we saw what happened on 9/11. America was attacked, and they had 2 wars as a result. And I would say what happened in Israel is far worse than what happened in 9/11. And 9/11 is one of the most impactful things I've ever witnessed. I actually saw it live. But what happened on October 7 were that can't stand. That absolutely cannot stand. I mean, they're torturing children, for Christ's sake. They're torturing children. We cannot allow that. We absolutely cannot allow that. And part of the problem is, yes, it's this Hamas terrorist group, but they are the elected government of Gaza. They are the ones who have been indoctrinating the citizens of Gaza for 20 years. Now, they talk about over 50% of the population of Gaza is children. These are children who have grown up knowing nothing but Hamas and being indoctrinated by Hamas their entire lives. This cannot be allowed to stand. When the hostages were taken into Gaza, they were taken into it was citizens and just average people in Gaza who were holding them hostage. Mia Shlem, who just did an interview, who was released, she wasn't held in an underground tunnel. She was held in a family house, like in a community. This cannot be allowed to stand. And Israel absolutely has every single right to defend themselves and to defend their people. You cannot just say, oh, look, the terrorists came in, they did this thing, naughty, naughty, don't do it again. I mean, Hamas fire rockets into Israel every day. Gaza could be so much more. Gaza should be so much more. Gaza has had that much money and infrastructure given to it. I mean, water pipes were built to provide water into Gaza, and they need to be constantly rebuilt because Hamas take the pipes and turn them into rockets, for crying out loud. They take all this money, this foreign aid that is meant to help the people of Gaza, and they funnel it to themselves, to their leaders who are living the high life in Qatar as billionaires. I mean, this is a disgusting, disgusting group, and they should not. They have to be eliminated. There is no two ways about it. Now, war is never a good thing, and innocent people do get caught up in it. But Hamas cannot be allowed to remain.
I'm just curious. Any chance you actually saw like the raw, unedited, the unedited actions of what actually took place, Chris?
On October 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff.
See, okay, because I'm a history teacher here in South Korea. So when I was teaching this to my kids, I don't know, I probably spent a month just talking about this topic alone. But I said, look, all right, if I was a Palestinian and I saw what Hamas did, and I have a daughter, Chris. I have one daughter. Her name's Leah. I think you saw her on stream. But I said, if I was sitting in there in Palestine and I saw what happened, I would be holding my daughter in my house and just crying my eyes out because I would know what would be happening as a result of that. So it's like you have to have such hatred of a people that like you don't care what's about to happen to your own family, So it's like when I saw the people who were dancing around and parading the people who just got kidnapped, I would be like, I don't understand your logic. You have to have such an irrational hatred of these people that you would be willing to say, I don't care, I'll damage myself as long as I'm damaging these people in the process. So that level of...
Yeah, and what you've got to understand is...
Chris, let me finish. That level of hatred, that level of intolerance is so irrational, like you can't reason with it. You know what I mean? If you're saying I'm willing to harm myself in the process, like it's insidious, but good.
So, okay. It's a bad situation. And why it's a bad situation is because the people who live in Gaza, they had been indoctrinated for years. They were indoctrinated by the Egyptians who were anti-Israel and anti-Jew, and then they've been indoctrinated by Arafat and the PLO. Then they've been indoctrinated now by Hamas. You're right. They've grown up and they're taught only hate. They genuinely believe that the Jews are this great evil that must be eliminated. And that's sad. But the thing is, Hamas don't give a shit. They couldn't care less about the people of Palestine. Hamas, their rulers are in Tehran. Iran is the one who is basically running, and Hamas, Hezbollah, groups like that. And the reason that this attack happened when it did was because Israel and Saudi Arabia were about to normalize relations. Saudi Arabia and Iran are regional, they're like in a regional Cold War. And that's why this happened. Now, the people of Gaza, they hate the Jews. They hate Israel. There's not going to be a live in peace. Israel doesn't want, this is something important to understand. Israel doesn't want Gaza. They tried to give Gaza back to Egypt when they gave Egypt the Sinai Peninsula, and Egypt said, no, we don't want it. We don't want it. Now, Egypt had ruled over, Gaza is historically Egyptian anyway, but after the war of independence, that when Israel became a country and all the Arabs surrounding attacked, Gaza went to Egypt. Gaza was ruled by Egypt. It wasn't this self-governing Palestinian. Palestinian, it's a made-up term. There was no Palestinian identity until the late 1960s, after Israel won the Six-Day War and suddenly had these territories that Israel were prepared to give back for peace. But the Arabs refused it. The Palestinians have been offered their own nation on multiple occasions, and they've walked away from it. Let's say the Palestinian leadership. Arafat was given a deal back in the 90s that would have seen the West Bank and Gaza become independent. There was a bit of negotiation because they had to work out where the borders would be because there was settlements and towns, and basically there was a deal. Well, then there was the Oslo Accords where Israel went to the table and said, "We will give you Gaza, we'll give you the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, as it's actually known, Judea and Samaria. There's a few settlements that we would like to keep, and we'd be prepared to give you land in Israel as compensation." That was their opening offer, basically saying, "We're going to give you everything. We want peace." They don't want. Israel doesn't want Gaza. They don't. Well, actually, I do think Israel probably by now, the West Bank is probably just going to. I can't see too much change happening there, but the Palestinian people have been offered their own state on many occasions, and under good. I mean, they were offered their own state in 1947. It's and instead of it's when the mandate or the British Mandate of Palestine, as it was known, was basically split into the Jewish and the Arab sections. The Jews went, "Yes, that's fine. It's less than we want. We accept." The Arabs declared war. That was the difference. And there's all these refugees because the Arab leadership from the other countries told the people in those towns, "No, leave. We'll take over. You'll be able to go back to your homes in a few days." They never got to go back to their homes. The ones who stayed are now, well, there's 2 million Arabs who live peacefully in Israel as citizens. They're the ones who stayed, and they've lived peacefully ever since.
So, I mean, I think this gets back to the reason why I was talking about Mein Kampf, because it's like to have a hatred of a people that strongly, you have to know where it's coming from. Like, to have a hatred of the Jews that are living in Israel who are trying to offer you peace. Like, they're trying to say, "Look, we're willing to bend, we're willing to try to accommodate you." Like, have you ever seen the movie Sierra Madre with the Humphrey Bogart? Well, there's this scene where like Humphrey Bogart has gone like totally crazy, and he's with these two people who are like, they're trying to offer him peace, and they're like, "Okay, like just go in peace." And he's like, "Oh, you just want me to turn around so you can like shoot me in the back." He's like, "That's the reason why you want me to go." And they're like, "No, like we just genuinely want to have we want you to go in peace." And have that level of hatred. Like, I'm just saying, you have to understand the roots of it, where it's coming from. And because for me, like, I have to tell you this, because I do have a Muslim friend here in South Korea who I've known for about 10 years. And we talk every few months. And every time I talk, I'm always making fun of the Quran or the Prophet, and he always finds it really funny. Like, he finds it hilarious. Like, we just joke back and forth to each other. I'm like, "Hey, how's Al-Qaeda doing?" Like, we just, because I try to show him that like I'm my friend. I don't really see him like that, But when we started talking, he literally told me this, Chris, and I could not believe I heard this coming out of his mouth. He said, "The Jews aren't humans, Isaiah." He said, "Their blood is mixed with dogs and pigs."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening, and I'm like, "You did not just say that, dude. Like, I like you. Like, I've helped you out financially, dude. You know what I mean? Like, I would vouch for you. If someone came against you, I would fight for you, dude. And you're saying that?" Like, and I said, because we both have daughters. He's a more recent father than me, and I was like, and I said his name. I'm not going to say his name, but I said, dude, I said, blah blah blah. I'll call him Chris. Let's say Chris. I said, Chris.
Don't use that name.
That's not his name, but I'm just saying as a filler.
Just call him Mo.
I said, Bob. Let's say Bob. I said,
Bob. Nice.
You want your daughter to grow up in a world thinking this way about people? Like, I'm telling you, as father to father, fuck the religion, fuck the politics. I'm talking to you as a father right now. You know what I mean? I said, you want your daughter to grow up in a world thinking about this way about people? And he's like, they're not even people. And I was like, wow, I would do anything in my power to try to keep my daughter from thinking this way about anybody. You know what I mean? So I'm like, this is such a level of as you said, indoctrination. Like it was disturbing, because take the religion, take the politics out of the equation. I'm like, just as a homo sapien, how could you feel this way about other homo sapiens? It was disturbing, Chris. This happened like last month. I've actually interviewed him on the podcast.
And you know what? You and I can sit here and say, this is disturbing, this is horrific. Throughout history,
right?
Many people have held the same view as that person. And this is where I'm grateful that I live where I do and when I do in a Western liberal democracy. Because let me tell you, Western liberal democracies, there is nothing better. This is the best that civilization has ever been. We're open, we're accepting. You and I can't comprehend that point of view, that someone who could think that about another group of people. But the sad thing is, it's commonplace. I mean, children's TV in Palestine has a Mickey Mouse style characters where they talk about how the evil Jews must be hunted. It's the kind of rhetoric that belonged, well, it didn't belong then, but you would see back in the 19th century Europe in the lead up to the Holocaust. It's that kind of that just awful racist, bigoted bullshit. And these people are indoctrinated with it. That needs to change. But in the meantime, Israel needs to be able to keep their own people safe.
Right. And this is the point.
What happened to them?
Right. This is the point of like the general point I was making, is that like the Nazis were having their children play a game called like Kill the Jew, where it's like a board game, but the goal of it is to kill Jewish people. So it's like, if you're being indoctrinated with that kind of stuff, if you are like, I'll tell you this, because I have this
I think actually there you're mistaking the Nazis for the Palestinians.
No, that might be true, but it's also the case. But look, okay, I'll tell you this, and then we'll get to the last question. Because Chris, and I have this up on my channel, dude. This is fucking disturbing, dude. I have to say this, man. I was in a tour bus, and our tour guides were from South Korea. And I have to say this. They saw a truck that was being driven. You're going to think that I'm lying about this, Chris, but it's genuinely true. I don't know how they did this, but they had a truck that had its hood off, and they were burning logs on the hood of the truck where the hood should be, and they were somehow able to make their truck run from that, okay? There were logs burning there. Don't ask me how they did that. I'm telling you, I saw it, okay? And when our tour guide was describing that, he was literally crying. He was crying, and he's like, they don't have any gas like in North Korea, so they have to resort to this. Like, they have to do this to run their cars to like. And I know it seems impossible. I saw some stuff there that absolutely seemed impossible, but I actually saw it with my own eyes. So you can't really say it's impossible when you see it being done. The point is, though, is that when I saw that level of indoctrination, I'm like, they have to be able to to get into these kids' minds. And if you ever seen the documentary A State of Mind about North Korea?
No, I have watched a
It's
lot
a,
of stuff on North Korea though.
yeah,
So.
it's about their Adion games, and you're like, dude, if you're being told that from kindergarten, of course you're gonna believe this way. It's like so. It seems like it would be illogical if you didn't think this way. Just in the same way as we think they're illogical, they're gonna think the same exact way that like we're illogical if you didn't believe this way. But anyway, last question. How do you personally? That's the lead up to. How do you personally try to escape echo chambers and try to see things from other perspective, whether that's a liberal or like maybe a religious person?
Well, I mean, by doing things
Yeah.
like this, by having conversations with, here I am, I'm a conservative atheist, having a conversation with a more liberal / moderate Christian. These conversations are good. I think, look, I think to an extent, I think we need our echo chambers. I think echo chambers aren't as bad as they make out, because there's people that we agree with, and there's people who are going to reinforce our beliefs, and that's okay, because your beliefs might be right. I mean, we're in an echo chamber, I guess, where we say that we don't, we wouldn't ascribe to what your Muslim friend thought of the Jews. That's our echo chamber to an extent. But I think it's always within reason good to have conversations with people who disagree, not because we need to have debates, not because we need to argue, not because we need to change minds, but because we need to understand where the other people are coming from. Conversations like this where you're asking me questions and I'm able to explain to yourself and your audience about my position on politics, atheism, and how I come to that. Now, I'm not expecting that by me having this conversation with you, you're going to say, you know what, Chris, gee, you were right about everything. I'm now a conservative atheist. But what I do hope is that at the very least, having had this conversation, you'll go, okay, well, I don't agree with Chris's position on a few things. Okay, but I understand why he thinks that. That makes sense. Okay, I get it. That's cool. And maybe it gives you something to think about. Maybe it helps to challenge your own viewpoint. Maybe it helps to reinforce your own viewpoint, because when people challenge what you think, when people challenge your ideas, what that does is that forces you to then argue on behalf of what you believe. It helps to reinforce your position. I mean, you and I could sit here and have a debate or a discussion about religion, and I'd throw some things at you that would make you go, I need to think about that. I need to answer it. Now,
Which you did.
at the end of that conversation, does that mean you're going to turn around and denounce Christianity? No, probably not, because that's something that's obviously a very sincere belief that you have. But what it will do is it'll make you think about things, and it will also help you as an individual argue for your position. And I think it's good to understand that not everything is right and wrong. I mean, I've got certain views on things. That doesn't mean that I'm right. Not everything I believe is going to be right. My views are formed because of my experiences, because of the society I live in, because of my personal situation and circumstances. If I was raised in Saudi Arabia, I would imagine that I would have very, very different views to the ones I have now. If I was raised in Gaza, I can almost guarantee I would probably not hold the position on Israel that I hold, because of the society that I was raised in. But you see, what I would hope is that in the future, we can have conversations, and respectful, meaningful conversations with people who are, from somewhere like Gaza, and they can explain their perspective and their point of view to us, and we can understand each other. Because if we understand each other, and we can respect each other, we can appreciate the value of that other person and their life, that they are a human, that they have meaning, that they have a right to exist. We can move forward together. Maybe on separate paths, but we can move forward.
Mm-hmm. And see, Chris, I've actually been in the home of former terrorists who were actually working with the families of slain Israelis, of terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of this organization called Combatants for Peace, which is one of the 5 organizations we support with the RHE podcast. But so I've actually seen that firsthand, that like people can be reformed from extremist thinking, and that, I think, Chris, if we're being honest, I think we've all fucked up a lot in our lives. Like, if we take our own lives and what?
Of course.
Yeah. So if we take that and like, we want to like want people to understand our intentions or where we're coming from, or maybe the baggage that we've had, but we frequently don't want to see that about other people. Because I think you made a good point. Hey, if I was born in Palestine or I was born in North Korea, I mean, chances are, if I'm being indoctrinated by North Korean propaganda, I might think that Kim Jong-un is like underweight and like he's handsome. I might actually think that, you know what I mean? So for me, I don't know. I guess a lot of people have never got a chance to see the kind of things that I've seen like in North Korea. But for me, it's made me more empathetic, because prior to going to, and I wrote this in my second book, like prior to going to North Korea, if you would have asked me how a German got indoctrinated into believing the things that would lead them to commit such horrific things, I would say there just doesn't make any sense. But after seeing it firsthand, I'm like, wow, I actually left there and I'm like, if that's the only thing you're being exposed to, yeah, I can understand how you would think that way, like it's understandable. So, I mean,
and we see it now in modern society. I mean, we say that we can't understand how people can go down that path, but have a look at the amount of pro-Palestinian rallies that are occurring now. These pro-Palestinian rallies begun after one of the most horrific attacks on after October 7. October 7 happens. By October 10, there's pro-Palestinian rallies in Western liberal democracies. That's shameful. That is absolutely shameful. It's disgusting, but it happened. So, how does it happen? There's probably a question for a psychologist. But the thing is, people and groupthink go hand in hand.
Right.
I hope it changes, but people and groupthink go hand in hand.
Right. Well, Chris, I want to say thank you very much for your time. It's not very much. I'll concede that somebody is like several steps above my intellect, but I'll have to concede that point here. So, but you're much more educated than I am.
Kind there, but that's kind of you to say.
It might be a little bit of a lie. I'm not supposed to lie as a Christian, but no, it's funny because if you ever think about this, like the people who you almost fought in life, like they usually wind up becoming your best friends, right? Or the people you fight, or the people, because you wind up developing a respect for them. So I think that's what I wind up doing with you, is that
we never have boring conversations, do we? It's always, I think we challenge each other in the way we think, which is nice.
Yeah. I do have one question for you that's unrelated, but
sure.
First of all, I do want to say that this is honest to God truth, that because I'm gonna feel so bad in telling you this, but when I came on Six Pack, I was coming up from South Korea, and this is funny. Now I think about this, traffic wind up playing an important role later on in mine and your relationship. But when I was coming up to Seoul, I wound up getting stuck in like traffic for like 2 hours. And then that wind up like I was doing an interview with people from the VIPs with Squid Game, which I think this year they're releasing their next season, because it's been like they've had to rebuild. But I was so exhausted. So whenever I finally got to you, because that caused this giant, like me being late and everything. So when I came to the only time I've ever been on a 6-pack, I was completely drained. Like if it wasn't for the fact that I told you I was going to be there, I would have just canceled. But I was so tired. So I must have felt like a total todger being on there with you guys. But uh, that being said, any chance I can come off around 2 with a 6-pack, or what do you guys got going on? Do you have any chance to revive that?
Well, we're doing a reunion special on Tuesday, so it's probably just going to be a bit of an OG crew thing.
Okay.
Whether that evolves into anything else, I'm not too sure. I'm sort of more focused on, I guess, the podcasting side of things. I like to have conversations about topics that interest me. There's religion certainly plays a part, but for a long time, it's all my channel tended to be about. And I've moved on from that phase. I've moved on from my angry atheist phase. I think for me, politics, current events, and history, and religion as it ties into a lot of that is probably the conversations I really want to have at the moment. So that tends to be the way things are going.
Do you think that you're evolving as a human?
Always.
Always, yeah. That's definitely the case.
Even when I make mistakes, I'm evolving.
You got last thoughts before we close out? This went about an hour over what I expected, but
it's pretty typical. Look, I guess the last thought, what I'd say to people is have conversations respectfully with people who hold an opposing view. Listen to them, understand them. Don't try to debate them. Don't try to change their mind. Just try to understand where they're coming from. And there's lots of atheists who are conservatives. Lots of us.
Yeah, you know what's fun, interesting? There's actually like a lot of like people in the LGBT plus community who are conservatives, and they tend to be like
heaps.
What?
Heaps and heaps.
Yeah. They tend to be silenced, but they're out there, and what you're saying.
That's because the LGBTQ groups have been taken over by woke losers, just like the atheist community had been. It's these woke losers, they infiltrate these groups, and it's whatever the group is about is usually 4th or 5th on the list of yeah. But no, most people I know who are LGBTQ, whatever the rest of it is, are conservative. Yeah, LMNOP and whatever. It's most are conservative, and there's some very strong LGBT groups out there who are purely conservative. So it's don't assume that people hold a certain political position just because of one thing, whether that's what their sexuality is, whether they believe in a God or not, or anything like that. So I think I was talking to myself in the audience there for a minute, but that's okay. We've got you back. I don't know how much of that you heard.
That's funny because I had a bit of a flashback because I was like, I'm glad I can joke with you because Chris and I joke offline, and I think, unfortunately, this is actually, I know this is a cultural problem because I've experienced this in America where like I'm Latino, and like as Latino, we bullshit and we fuck around with each other like a lot. Like we're like, we'll talk shit like when we're playing basketball, or we're playing cards, and like if I go around a white person, they might take that as like I'm being really offensive, but it's like, no, this is just how we play basketball. This is just how we play cards. Like, you know what I mean? We like try to intimidate each other, and it's all fun. Like we'd talk a lot of crap in the game, and then we'd go off the court and shake hands, and it's like it's nothing. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Kind of like, I know you know this in MMA. People will try to kill each other in the ring, and then afterwards they'll pick each other up and hold each other and kiss each other. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's a level of respect.
Yeah. So it's like I'm not sure if that always comes up all the time, like with because it's a different culture. But anything I've ever said to you online or in streams or whatever we've said is like told out of love. It's like out of respect, and it's like out of appreciation.
I would think that you know me well enough by now that if I don't like something you say, I'll just tell you.
Okay, great.
I'm pretty direct like that. But look, you and me are fine. I mean, yeah, we had a little bit of a funny misunderstanding there at one point. We moved on.
A few.
We've had conversations since. I mean, you know, when you reached out to me about this, I didn't hesitate. I was more than happy to come on board.
No, so you gave your last thoughts. I'll give my last thoughts because I can tell you this, that I have distinctively been a conservative in my life, and I've distinctively been the most left-wing, like on the spectrum, like a 1% leaning all the way to the left. And now it's like having lived over a decade of my life overseas and interacting with different cultures and different people, having experienced Muslims and, you know, having been in North Korea, I understand that people can be persuaded by thinking that they maybe not, if they had a total view of the perspective, maybe they may not agree with that totally. Like, this is one of the reasons why North Korea doesn't allow people to travel outside of their country, because they know that if they like see South Korea, if they see K-pop, if they see K-dramas, that they'll have a different perspective. So I think if you only take one thing from Isaiah Diesel is that, like, just try to see things from a different perspective, because if you see things from a different perspective, like, you might not see this exactly the same way that you see it, because we're all limited and we're all trying to figure things out. And so, you know, if you only take one thing away from this podcast, that'll be the only thing I want you to remember is that, you know, just try to understand people. And yeah, that being said, Chris is linked in the podcast, and check it out in the description. And thank you very much for your time. I may not always agree with Chris, but I have mad respect for him intellectually. Even I have more respect for Chris intellectually than a Christian who just like blindly accepts everything that they're being told and that their pastor is feeding them. So that being said, check us out our website. Check us out Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Try and just have conversations where we're trying to normalize each other and trying to see things from other perspective. So that being said, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you back on our next podcast. And I do want to leave you with this outro. And yeah, Chris is linked in the description, as I said. And again, I can't thank you very much for this, Chris. You're awesome, man. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation.